Sometimes to truly make a change, you have to do something big, something dramatic, and something that ensures that you never go back to the emotional and physical traps that have made you so unhappy. One of the best days of my life was the day I smashed my scale. I loved it so much, I think we should all do it. And to make rejecting diet culture even more exciting, I'm giving away free advice and prizes, including a full year of body kindness coaching with me. So to join, visit bodykindnessbook.com/BK Scale Smash. That's bodykindnessbook.com/BK Scale Smash. There you give your name and email and you'll get the motivational coaching from me. Lots of ideas for how you can participate right there on the page. And I look forward to joining you all summer long while we work together to just tell the world that we don't need scales, we don't need judgment, we don't need criticism. What we need is body kindness. Because real health is about being good to yourself. It's time for Body Kindness, the place where all bodies fit and weight is just a number. Hi, I'm Rebecca Scritchfield, author of the book Body Kindness, registered dietitian nutritionist, and host of this podcast. My topic today is finding your true voice. And this topic is important to me and to Body Kindness because we all know that we have a very strong inner critic voice that likes to judge every little thing we do. It is often the voice of, the articles in the magazines that we're reading, or that voice that tells us that what we're, doing isn't good enough. And, that voice is nice and loud and strong and can really wreak havoc on somebody who's trying to learn body kindness, on somebody who's trying to be good to themselves. And I really think the disconnect is that we're not in tune with our caregiver voice anymore. The voice that wants us to be happy and healthy and strong and cares about our well-being. It's that voice that you can very easily maybe extend to somebody else, but have a difficulty finding for yourself. And so my hope for today's conversation is that we all can get a much deeper sense of what it could feel like and what could be effective in finding your true voice. And my special guest to discuss this today is Anita Johnston. Anita Johnston is a depth psychologist, storyteller, and author of Eating in the Light of the Moon: How Women Can Transform Their Relationships with Food Through Myth, Metaphor, and Storytelling, which has been published in 6 languages, along with numerous book chapters and articles in professional journals. She has been working in the field of women's issues for over 35 years and is currently the clinical director of Ipono, Hawaii, which has an outpatient eating disorder programs in Honolulu, the Big Island of Hawaii, and a residential treatment program in Maui. She's the co-creator of the Light of the Moon Cafe. It's an interactive e-course, women's circle, and online workbook for eating in the light of the moon. Dr. Johnston provides individual consultations via teleconferencing, and she lectures around the world to professional organizations, conferences, universities, medical institutions, and the community at large. She's best known for integrating metaphor and storytelling into her training as a clinical psychologist to explain complex issues that underlie struggles with eating, weight, and body image. And I'm so excited to have you on Body Kindness podcast today, Dr. Johnston. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Well, let's start. I really would like the listeners to know a little bit more about you and the work that you're currently doing.
Oh, well, my story goes way back. I got involved. I've always been interested in women's issues. That's just been an interest of mine, really, probably since I was a teenager back in the 1960s. I came from a very strong feminine, female-oriented family, multicultural. And so I was always just fascinated by that. And so I did. I got into psychology and studied. I did my dissertation on ethnic identity of Chamorro women, which is the indigenous people of Guam, where I'm from. and they're my people. And then as I was working as a psychologist, I was supervising a psychology intern in Hawaii who was studying the incidences of eating disorders in Hawaii. And the more we talked about what was going on, the more it became clear that there were so many women and girls of all ethnicities, all sizes, all walks of life that were struggling with eating and body image issues. And so I just started to become very curious about that. Why these women and girls, and why was the issue around food and their bodies, and why females also in the first place? Because that's who was showing up back in those days. This is now, the early 1980s. So that's how I just started getting interested. And so I'm a storyteller, but as a psychologist, I'm a story listener. So I just started listening to their stories to see if I could figure out what was the common denominator, what was going on here, that there was so much dissatisfaction with their bodies and sometimes pure hatred. And why was the struggle around eating and food? And so I just started loving working with these individuals, created a center called the Anorexia and Bulimia Center of Hawaii back in the early 80s. And out of that, then out of my work, became the book Eating in the Light of the Moon, because my clients kept asking me where they could read more about the concepts I was talking about. And I went, okay, I guess I have to write it, because I really didn't know where to send them. So that's sort of how it began for me. And it has continued to be just an incredible, amazing journey of exploration and community and engaging and teaching and learning. So that's how I got involved. And then for many years, Eating in the Light of the Moon was published over 20 years ago.
So it's an archaic text.
Yes, I've been around a while. And for years, people kept asking me, well, is there a workbook for Eating in the Light of the Moon? And honestly, every time I sat down to think about doing that, it just did not inspire me to write. And that's the only way I can write. But eventually I was working with a colleague, dietitian Elizabeth Peterson, because I had been doing soul hunger workshops around the country. And then she wanted to learn how to do Eating in the Light of the Moon support groups. And so she started doing that, and nobody wanted to leave. And so she said to me, she goes, well, do you think it's possible to create Women's Circle online in this kind of community that we're creating? And I thought, well, I don't know, but I'm willing to try. So that was over 5 years ago, and we created the Light of the Moon Cafe, and there's a forum, there's a community. It's also a course, but it's really an online interactive multimedia workbook for Eating in the Light of the Moon. And that's been something that has continued to inspire me, because I'm on the forum every day reading what these women are writing, and it's just absolutely incredible. So I love being a part of the transformational process, and that's why I still do it.
Well, so that's interesting to note. Then it's not like a passive workbook; it's actually interactive with you.
Yes.
Reading and responding to folks who were there doing their own work.
Oh, yes. Every day they would get something in their email box, whether it's an audio of me telling a story and explaining the metaphor and how that might be connected with eating difficulties, or it might be a poem, or it might be a drawing or writing activity. And then for every day, there is a forum, and people post their drawings, or there's one rule for the forum that nobody thus far has ever broken, which is no advice, only support. And so we have playlists to listen to and all sorts of things. So we come at it from a lot of different ways, in a way for me that is engaging and fun. And then we have live calls also with me, where people may have particular questions that they really want to dive into a little more deeply. So it is a community that provides respite from the insanity of the diet culture that we live in.
And it is insane. I mean,
yes, it is.
It is so insane. Well, so here's the thing. I believe, and I guess I believe because this is from my own experience too, but like the average person, a typical person, doesn't quite understand the power of metaphor in healing from past experience.
Right.
And so in this context of like finding your true voice, kind of working away from diet culture, finding, I'll often get questions in the Body Kindness Facebook group like, how do you run with body kindness? Because every time I run, it's about how I'm not fast enough, or, how do you eat that cupcake, and, or how do you eat the kale salad? Because it looks like a diet food to me. And I can tell now, like I've done enough of my work where it's like, A, I've been there, but B, like, I feel grateful where I'm at, but also like, it must be so hard to be stuck in diet culture, especially now with like Whole30 and paleo being the thing. Like for me, it was like, give up Diet Coke, give up Slim Fast, give up, it was really clear what was diet. And now it's just twisted. But can you help people understand why metaphor, like what it does? It's not just woo, right? Like it is real brain stuff. So help us understand why this is so powerful.
Okay. Well, Carl Jung talked about the power of metaphor is that it affects the psyche on multiple levels. So it affects you on the mental level where you kind of translate what the metaphor is. It also affects you on the emotional level. You feel something. And thirdly, it affects you on the imaginative level. But here's the thing, according to him, that what makes metaphor so powerful is that it affects these three levels simultaneously, and that allows access to a deeper part of the psyche. Now, what neuroscientists are seeing, which I love, because when I used metaphor with my clients, I knew when it would click because I would see the lights go on in their eyes. Now, neuroscience is able to measure the brain, and basically what they've discovered is the neurocorrelate of metaphor in the brain, which is the anterior superior temporal gyrus. It's in a little fold right above your right ear. And what they've noticed, they did all these different studies to see what happens in the brain when somebody gets it. And what happens is 30 milliseconds before the insight regarding the metaphor even occurs, there's a huge burst of gamma waves out of the anterior superior temporal gyrus. And so I think that's what I was seeing as the lights going on in someone's eyes. And that's the highest frequency brainwave there is, and actually helps create new neural pathways. So what happens is you see connections between things that previously had seemed unrelated. And it helps you really comprehend things with a depth and breadth. For example, like when you think of a metaphor, so when Romeo says, Juliet is my sun, he's not saying she's a flaming ball of hydrogen, right? No, what he's saying is she lights up my life. Now, to get those connections, it takes you into a different part of your brain, more into the right side of your brain. And so you're able to get things. You're even able to feel what Romeo feels when he says, she lights up my life. Now, if you were to try to figure it out and make, okay, here's all the qualities of the sun and here's all the qualities of Juliet, you're using a different part of your brain. It's not going to get you there. Now, what I like about metaphor is that it helps us access a new way of perceiving our world, our experiences, and ourselves that is kinder, which fits with your work. There's not that critical faculties are on the other side. So that's where metaphor can be so powerful.
Yeah. Well, and this makes complete sense to me because I am telling clients and people who read the book and ask questions that
Mm-hmm.
it literally is, when I say like become the person you want to be, right? That
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
this is really possible, and it does really involve rewiring your brain, and
Yes.
that means going through experiences with a different mindset, and
Right.
even when it's uncomfortable,
Right.
being open to exploring.
Right.
And so I think that this is a key message to help people understand that,
Right.
when you really want to change, you're willing to use anything in the toolbox. And so what we're saying here is that you can use the power of metaphor to turn lights on and create a path that just opens up your brain to this idea that you really can find a caregiver voice, that you really can do these things that feel so impossible and difficult.
Right, because one of the things that Jung said is when you're working with metaphor, remember there's the three aspects of the psyche, the mental, the emotional, and the imaginative. And he says the transforming power resides in the imaginative realm. Now, sometimes I'll have clients that say, well, I don't have a very good imagination. Well, what do you think worrying is? Right?
Good. Yes,
right?
I love
In my
that.
mind, it's a misuse of a good imagination. So, what you're talking about is imagining you being how you want to be. Now, in my book, that's a good use of imagination. And because that then brings in the transforming element.
Right, right. And you need that transforming element to get going on a path, right?
To change.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I want to and actually this may even be refreshing your memory as well, but I want to let the listeners know how I first came into contact with you. So I became a dietitian as a career changer. So I had studied chemistry in undergrad, and I had wanted to help people, but it was like, no, not medicine. There wasn't a nutrition program, though. I taught exercise, and it was very much in the body loathing diet mindset, but I would say, oh, this is health, but it was like, I got my knowledge from all the bad diet magazines, and I was only happy with myself if I was being good. And then, when I dealt with emotional eating, it was, this vicious cycle. But even when I entered in nutrition, I was like, I'm going to do weight management because I thought this is what it means to help people get healthy. Like, that's just what I thought. And I ended up getting a athlete client and I was like, something's not right here. And anyway, long story short, turned out that she had an eating disorder. I was able to get her help. And then this, like a light, flipped, kind of came on, and I was like, maybe this is a place where I could learn and grow. And I was just getting open to the idea that stuff I was doing with my clients wasn't working, no matter what they weighed, athlete or not. The weight management crap I was pulling was really unhelpful. and I finally did like that vulnerable, like you have some more of your own work to do here too. And that was kind of just a huge breakthrough for me. Anyway, I had met a dietitian friend at Leslie Schilling. And she's like, well, I'm going to this eating disorder conference in Tennessee. Anita Johnston speaking, and you got to hear da-da-da-da-da. So it was all, prepped for me and everything. And we're in your session and you're going through these metaphors. And it really was transformational for me to kind of listen to a story and try to make parallels with how I was actually thinking and feeling and doing. But there was one in particular, and I can't remember the whole thing, but it was related to looking at patterns of eating sweets, and
right.
I always saw it as like, oh, well, it's literally because you deprive yourself and then eventually you can't handle the deprivation and then you overdo it, like a very literal. And you said, well, let's think about what life's not sweet enough. Like, doesn't it make sense that then somebody's craving a sweet? And it was the first time that I got this connection, like as a dietitian, that, okay, wait a minute, maybe it's really not just about, counting foods and this and that, but just about generally a person's well-being might lack pleasure. And so this food is coming in as a placeholder. And for me, it was like, ding, 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 ding. I think you deal with that. And I think that's something your clients deal with. So that was my first introduction. And I was like buying Eating the Light of the Moon and reading it. And, you know, it was just really helpful. And I was just curious for today, you know, I know a lot of people, I mean, we hear sugar's going to kill you or addictive or whatever, and they're really struggling with, hey, I like to have permission to enjoy sweets, but it's so hard with all these other messages I get. So do you have any sort of thoughts or advice like around this sort of food and pleasure connection for people?
I do. Yes. Well, one of the things that I find problematic is that we live in such a literal culture. And that can be a trap a lot of times, because most people don't understand that whatever the struggle happens to be, there's meaning in it, and oftentimes profound meaning in terms of whatever it is you're doing with eating and food, whether it's restricting or yo-yo dieting or binge eating or whatever it is, that there, if you can look at what's going on with a metaphoric eye, with your inner eye, then you can start to see patterns that can be so revealing. And so I like to work with the food itself. I like to follow the breadcrumbs because that's there. It's right there in front of your face, but then to look at it differently. And so basically, the way it works is you have to crack the code. So there's information that's available to you, but it's coded. And so it's a matter of decoding it through metaphor. And it works something like this. Now, bear in mind, this has to do with certain categories, and we're all different. We're all individuals, but it's a good place to get started. And it also has to do when you're wanting to eat foods and you know you're not physically hungry, but you still want to eat those foods. And so that's when the symbolic nature of the foods themselves comes into play and is bringing information, valuable information. So it works something like this. Sweet foods, as you remembered, have to do with either feeling like there's not enough sweetness in your life or you're not sweet enough. Crunchy, salty foods typically are connected to unexpressed anger and frustration. Soups and stews, warm foods, usually are related to a craving for emotional warmth in your life. Spicy foods typically are associated with a desire for excitement, stimulation, and change. And chocolate, sex and romance. We know that from Valentine's Day, right? Now, if your listeners are interested, I have a free gift that they could get at lightofthemooncafe.com/BK for body kindness that spells all of this out. So they don't have to be kind of scribbling it down.
Oh, that's
they're
wonderful.
Interested.
Well, thank you for that. And I'll include the link in the show notes for everyone.
Okay, great. And so what happens though, you start to get curious rather than beating yourself up about what you're doing with food. And it brings in what I call compassionate curiosity. And that's how you crack the code. So, for example, I had a woman I was speaking with not too long ago, because when you're listening metaphorically, you're listening for the language, you're listening for the energy as well as the qualities of the food. So she was in London, I believe, and we were doing a session, and she said, "Well, I binge on sweet foods, and also though," and she said, "and I'm really embarrassed about this, I binge on ketchup." And I said, so as we started talking about what was going on in her life, she was working for a startup company, and she was just frantically busy all the time. And her boyfriend happened to work for the same startup company, and they were under a great deal of stress. They were having a launch. And so she just binged on sweets and ketchup. And I said, so how's that going with both of you under the same amount of stress at the same time? And she goes, well, yeah, he gets really grouchy. I said, not much sweetness there, right? And she went, yeah. And I said, and are you always trying to catch up? Because you see, when she said the word ketchup, I heard the energy. I was listening. I was tuning in with my inner ear. And there was energy around that. And I went, ketchup? What catching up. And then as she described what was going on just before her latest binge, it was clear to see. So that's because my ear is attuned, but individuals do it all the time. And I was once working with an individual that she was an emergency room physician, and she came into session just beating herself up. She was being so mean to herself. She goes, "Oh my God, I can't believe what I did. I'm so disgusted. I'm just, this is just ridiculous." And I said, whoa, what happened? And she said, "Well, I got off of work. I came home. I fixed dinner. I was fixing chicken tenders for when my husband got home, and then I ate them all myself before he even got home. And I'm so disgusted with myself." I said, whoa, we gotta go back here. So tell me, so you were working in the ER, tending to all kinds of physical and emotional trauma, right? And she goes, "Right." I said, "Yeah, what was it, 12, 14-hour shift?" She goes, "Yeah." And I said, and we had worked together for quite a while. So I asked her, I said, "Well, what do you think you were really hungry for?" Because I was going for the metaphoric hunger. And she said, "A hug." And I said, "Yeah, you wanted some TLC, some tender loving care, and instead you ate the chicken tenders."
Oh, wow.
Now, you see, this may seem ridiculous, but when it clicks, and she just started laughing because the language itself carries meaning for us at a very unconscious level. But if you crack the code, you can access that and get to the meaning. So she'll never be able to eat chicken tenders again if she's not hungry, without asking herself, "Do I need a hug?" You see, once you start to see what the deeper meaning is for you, it's very powerful. And the thing is, we all do this. We all do this to one degree or another. It's not like, oh, there's those weird people that, eat for reasons other than physical hunger, and that's a bad thing. It's not even always a bad thing.
We're all emotional eaters.
Exactly. And the key is, though, if you can allow it to teach you something about yourself, about your other hungers that are needing to be fed, then you can move in that direction and feed those other hungers. So I can give you an example from my own life. This was many years ago, and I had a private practice in my home in Hawaii. And I was sitting around. I had a lunch and a couple-hour break, and all of a sudden, I had an urge. Now, the thing about an urge is urgent, right? That's an urge. That's just its nature. And I had an urge. I had a craving for vanilla ice cream dipped in chocolate. So I checked in to check my hunger, because it's just automatic for me to do that. And no, there was not a hunger signal anywhere. But I wanted a vanilla cone dipped in chocolate. So I asked myself, I said, well, what could this be about? And, I got the answer that often people get when they say, well, what's the other hunger I'm feeling? The answer is usually, I don't know. I feel fine. Everything's okay, right? So I did what I often tell my clients to do, is go get the food, but eat it consciously, deliberately, bite by bite, not with the diet mentality. It's like, okay, now I'm going to have this, and then tomorrow I'm going on a diet, or I'm going to have this vanilla ice cream dipped in chocolate just once. No, to eat it with as much consciousness as you can muster, paying attention to textures, tastes, memories, whatever comes up for you as you eat the food. So that's what I ran to there was a frozen yogurt place not far. It was just a minute or two drive from my house. So I run in there and I say, okay, I need a vanilla ice cream cone dipped in chocolate. And this is Hawaii, right? So the woman says, oh, I'm sorry, ma'am, but it's too hot today. And so the vanilla won't stand up, on the cone. And I went, well, and then she said, well, I tell you what, though, I can put it in a cup and pour the chocolate over it and put the cone in upside down. And I thought, perfect, because now I can put it on my lap, drive home, sit at my table, and eat it bite by bite, consciously, deliberately, with as much compassionate curiosity as I can muster. So I was doing this, trying to ask myself, well, what is it? What is it? And finally it popped. Oh, Dairy Queen. Now, to give you an idea of what the meaning there was for me about that, is that when I was a little girl, growing up on the island of Guam in the 50s and 60s, there were only 2 fast food restaurants on the entire island, and one of them was Dairy Queen. And every Sunday after church, my dad would take all of us kids to Dairy Queen, and I would get a vanilla cone dipped in chocolate. So what I realized was going on for me is I was hungry for a time when I was a little girl, and nothing bad ever happened, because fast forward to what was going on in that moment, 9/11 had just happened. And I watched those horrific images on TV, and every part of my being wanted to shut down. I did not want to feel a thing, thank you very much. It was too horrific. But I had clients who had been in those buildings. I had clients who had loved ones in those buildings. And in order for me to work with them, I had to stay open. So what was going on is I was so hungry for the time that I was a little girl, lived on a little island, and nothing bad ever happened. I went, okay, I got it. So now I go in to see my next client, and she comes rushing in, and she's panicking. She goes, oh my God, you're going to have to help me. I'm going to gain back that 40 pounds I lost. And she's just in this panic. I said, whoa, what's going on? She goes, well, I can't stop eating vanilla ice cream. I don't even like vanilla ice cream. And I said, well, was there ever a time you did like vanilla ice cream? She said, yeah, Dairy Queen. And I started laughing. She was from New York City. And so I told her, this is one of those times I think self-disclosure is really important. And I said, well, let me tell you what I just did. And she got it. She realized, yes, that was the process that she was going through as well. So later on that evening, I was talking to one of my sisters who still lives on Guam, and I told her what I did. I said, you won't believe this. And she said, oh my gosh, that's why I did it. And I said, what? She goes, I drove in rush hour traffic to the only Dairy Queen still left on the island because I just had to have it. And she had her own health food store with her own frozen yogurt, little things that she could help herself to. But no, she had to have that. So that shows you how deep those connections go for all of us. And the idea is there's nothing wrong with it, but once you bring it to consciousness, then you can have a greater understanding about who you are. And the food is food.
Yeah. It's so important too, because you feel kind of uncertain about, well, how am I supposed to live my life and enjoy ice cream or birthday parties or, and you don't have a language for what it feels like to be off of a diet. And so It sounds like, well, it trying to reframe the good versus bad behavior, good versus bad person. And exactly in what you were explaining is that, it could be a beneficial choice to choose.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
To say, I am going to soothe with food right now, but here's how it's different. I'm thinking about what I really want. Right. I'm going to enjoy it on the park bench in the sun or at my table. And with this conscious knowledge, so it's like you're staying tuned in. This is a conscious knowledge of that hug. And it tends to not be too like it's not going to make you like 10 out of 10 on the fullness scale when you are tuned in.
Well, that's it. So there are times that I'll think, oh, Dairy Queen. And I'll go, okay. Now, am I homesick? Am I longing? Is life feeling like a little too hard right now? And I sure wish I was a little girl without a care in the world. Now, that doesn't mean I won't have the Dairy Queen. I may still choose to have that. Or I may not. I may instead pick up the phone and call home or something like that. Or I may do both. But it takes the charge away from it because there's no longer, and this is getting back to what you're talking about, that inner critic is what will fuel the charge. It fuels the urge because then you're trying to shut that voice down as well as dealing with whatever else is coming up for you. And it gets to feel out of control because you're fighting an aspect of yourself on top of everything else.
Yeah. Well, so I had planned to ask this other question related to permission to eat, and I feel like now is the time. So this is another story, and it's almost embarrassing to mention because it's from a time in my past that the best I can do now is be grateful for struggling because it's made me the person I am today. But I'm definitely not proud of how my mind used to work. And it also relates to you again. And you have no idea that this happened. So this was again with I was again with Leslie, and I don't know how, but she was going to a very small dinner, and you were going to be at the dinner, and she asked to bring a friend, and she brought me. I don't live in Tennessee, but I mean, we didn't even live by each other, so I don't know how. Maybe it was all part of that conference, and I am weaving it all together, but. We were out to this small dinner, and I was being the version of Rebecca that I knew how to be, which is like, read the menu with fear. Wait until you hear other people talk about what they're going to order. So it's kind of like I had my safety of fish, diet mind, but I really wanted to get steak. So anyway, enough, people were ordered. I decided to get this steak, and it was like literally the food came, and you don't even know it, but it was like you were giving me this experiential lesson, because you just enjoyed a steak like I've never seen anybody enjoy a steak before. I mean, it looked orgasmic. Like every bite, you were fully in. And like, I'm watching you going, I want to be her. Like, I could just tell. I was like, she has this permission. Like, I'm sitting here, am I allowed to have it? Just all the thoughts going on, and even like calorie thoughts, and like, be cool, and it was like so overthinking and conflicted in the rules. And I turn and look at you, and it's like, nope, just enjoying my steak, and this full permission to get full. I mean, I'm not in your body, but my guess is like you have this full permission to get full and have it not be a negative. And I don't think, I'm there now, but most people I work with, if there is not a full permission to just get whatever you want and enjoy, there has to be an attachment to guilt or shame or something. So what kind of response do you have for that?
Well, it's a journey getting there. I think, it's not an overnight process, but it really does go back to consciousness and paying attention to all the voices in your head. You see, there is that critical voice, but the problem is it starts to take over and starts, being critical about things that aren't in its domain, like, what you should or shouldn't eat, or how you shouldn't talk, or how you should or shouldn't behave. There's an area for the inner critic, and it really needs to have a job. So thankfully, my inner critic had the job of making sure there were no dangling participles in my book, right? Don't you want that inner critic? And it got me through graduate school and that sort of thing. But if you don't have another set of voices that you're in communication with, I know people are afraid of this, but I listen to voices in my head all the time. And sometimes it is the voice of the inner critic, but I get to choose which one I'm going to respond to. And so I think that's something people don't realize, is just because the inner critic speaks up doesn't mean that you have to give her, front stage, permission. There's other voices that exist within us. And I think one of the most powerful ones for women who have a strong inner critic around food is the voice of the inner mother. So, and we work with this a lot at the Light of the Moon Cafe. We spend a whole week on every day on creating the inner mother, because we live in such a literal culture. We confuse the energy of Mother Ing, which is soothing, comfort, and nurture. We think that the only place we can get it is either from our mothers or the person who raised us. And if they're no longer living or they're not capable of delivering it, we're screwed. Or we reach for the concrete physical symbol of Mother Ing, which is food. Now, food does comfort and soothe. But the problem is we kind of get the wires crossed a little bit. And so if that's the only way you know how to soothe yourself and aren't able to tune in consciously that you need comforting and soothing, then it becomes like a one-trick pony over and over again. And that really does allow the critical voice to take over. So it's sort of like this. It's symbolic. So if you can imagine that for most of us, our very first experience on the planet when we're in distress, is to be given the breast or the bottle, it's no wonder that we connect food with soothing and comfort in that way. And then we connect mothering with whoever mothered us. But we don't realize that it's an energetic that is available everywhere. You can get mothering from your dog. You can get mothering from your husband. You can get mothering from the person next door. You can get mothering from Mother Nature. Once you understand what the desire for mothering feels like. And so rather than concretizing it, you access what that energy feels like, and you start to create within your psyche an inner mother. Now, for many of us, well, no, I have to say for most of us, it's archetypal. And archetypal is a concept that crosses all culture and all time. So you take the concept of mother. If you went all the way back in time, you'd find that concept. If you were able to go into the future, you'd find that concept. And if you went to any culture on the planet, you would find that concept of mothering. But because we're so literal, we either think we can only get it from our mothers or from the concrete physical symbol of mothering, which is a verb, not a noun, but the concrete physical symbol is food. So if you think of it this way, you could have 1,000 American flags. Would you be more free? No, it's just the symbol of freedom. It's not freedom itself. And so when you start to create your own inner mother, and none of us, it's archetypal, none of us ever got the perfect mother that gave us everything we wanted, when we wanted, how we wanted, as much as we wanted, and so on, right? Some were a little luckier than others and more fortunate, but nobody got the perfect mother. And so when I look at that, I go, well, gee, what's that about? Whose idea was that? And the more I thought about it, I realized, because that's our job. That's our job. We have to create that within our own psyches. So we have to create the inner mother that would say, not the inner harsh mother would say, chocolate for breakfast, what the hell are you thinking? Or the inner mother that says, chocolate for breakfast, whatever you want, dear, is, just go at it. No, you want an inner mother that goes, chocolate for breakfast, what's that about? Not with judgment, but with curiosity. In a way that still nurtures and comforts, that understands the need for that, and is curious about it, how you can best get it. So for me, everyone talks about the inner child. Well, where's the inner mother for the inner child that can provide that compassion and help support the cultivation of awareness and mindfulness? So the idea is that as you grow your attention to these aspects of yourself, then they start to take up more space and there's less room for the inner critic. It's sort of like when you go into a room, you don't push the dark out, you turn on a light. So that fills the room. So the more you cultivate this communication with this aspect of yourself, then it just becomes automatic. The neuroscience shows us that these neural pathways that start off as little trails through a jungle become like superhighways, and you can go down them faster and faster and faster because of the repetition of listening and to that aspect of yourself. So I think probably what you were observing, I don't know for sure because I don't remember, but I was in contact with my inner mother who, interestingly enough, many years ago, it's interesting you tell the story about steak, because when I went into menopause and I went to see my naturopath to find out what was going on, because I was flooding, which is a real heavy bleeding. And there was not a a physical problem, but she did say, but Anita, your iron is way too low. I think you're going to need to eat steak 3 times a week for 3 weeks. And I went, what? Because I hadn't had steak in 15, 20 years, not because I had restricted it, but because my husband had a reaction. He couldn't eat red meat. It upset his stomach. And so we just never had it. But I thought, well, I don't even know if I like red meat. But she said, well, you can take a pill, and I went, oh no, I think I'd rather do it with the food. So it was my inner mother. And I remember the moment when we went out to dinner and I ordered a steak and I had 2 bites and every cell in my body went ding, 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 ding. And I went, wow. And the next morning when I woke up, I thought, oh my gosh, this is what it's like to wake up not tired. So so early on, years before, my inner mother would prompt me. I would know what that felt like when I needed to have steak, and then I would enjoy it immensely.
That's so interesting. And to even watch it kind of come full circle.
Yeah.
And in all that story, I could also feel another difficulty people struggle with where the inner mother could be helpful. And it's funny because it makes perfect sense. Like when I say like find your inner caregiver, it's like duh,
right.
what's a symbol for a caregiver? Mother.
Right.
So it all makes great sense.
Right.
Because we also struggle with accepting our bodies as they are because of what diet culture says is ideal, and especially people in large bodies who, it's like, how am my goal is to change, get rid of diet culture by promoting fat acceptance. And then so you don't have to work so hard to love yourself, but you also have to get through today. Right. So it's like, using that innate skill of mothering.
Right. And imagining
right,
what you
would do.
So once you imagine the perfect mother for you, the perfect mother that gives you everything you want, when you want it, how you want it, the way you want it, and none of the nonsense you don't want. So what would the perfect mother say to you when you say, you know what, I don't like my thighs? What would she say? Would you say, well, that's because they're ugly? Well, is that what the perfect mother would say? No, that's not how she talks. And so, you listen, and you listen to that voice who, would say, oh, sweetheart, everybody has different kinds of thighs, and you happen to have ones that are big and strong, and they're fabulous.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's so good.
You see, isn't that the kind of mother you would want?
Yes.
So, and here's even the better part about this. It gets better and better because a lot of people say, oh, great, so I have to do it all myself. Well, yes and no, because what happens when you create a strong inner mother, it functions as an antenna because you start to recognize what that frequency of mothering feels like, what that particular constellation of vibrations feels like, and then it attracts towards you those who can provide it and attracts you towards people that you can get it from. So that when you recognize the need for that, you'll know which friend to call, right? You might not call your problem-solving friend that says, well, just do this and then it'll be fine. No, you might want the friend that says, oh my gosh, I can see why you're having such a hard time with that. I get it. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is exactly what you need. You don't need the problem solver just telling you just shut up and just think this way.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, later on you might, after you've gotten, the support and nurture that you need, then you might go to the how-to. But if you go to the how-to first, it's usually the harsh inner. And this is not a blow on stepmothers. Okay, this comes from fairy tales. But we have the archetype of the wicked stepmother in fairy tales that represents the inner critic in alignment with the inner mother. And it's not pretty. It's nothing but trouble. The fairy tales tell us is trouble when she shows up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we're starting to run out of time, but I do have to ask one more thing. And it's about one of the first and one of still the most special metaphors to me. I'll give the link in the show notes for the full video, but it's the log.
Yeah.
I love it. The second I saw it, I literally would have movie session in my client sessions. Like, let's watch this and then let's reflect on these together. But, so for context for the listeners, it's the expectation is, oh, body kindness sounds great. Get the book, read the book. Well, where's my magic? Like, voila. And, and it really is, we're hoping for this straight, uncomplicated, undifficult path to a better life, path to our freedom. And it just is never going to work that way. And I think the log is a great metaphor for helping people to understand what it's really about. So how can you help listeners kind of understand how that is so important to kind of a person's journey to freedom?
Well, it's the scenic route, right? Sometimes we just have
the road less traveled.
Exactly. So, I remember the moment when this metaphor popped in my head and I was trying to explain to a client, first of all, what the process was of recovery, and also to remove a lot of the shame that she was feeling from her inner critic just beating her up, and also introduce the idea that there's a skill set involved, and it takes a while to learn a skill. So, you imagine that you're on the bank of a raging river and it's pouring down rain and you slip and fall in and you're drowning. You're getting pulled down through the currents and along comes a big log and you grab on. And the log saves your life. It keeps you from drowning in very turbulent waters. So the log becomes a metaphor for whatever the struggle is with eating and food, in the sense that it keeps your head afloat above some really strong emotional times. And then in the metaphor, the log carries you to a place in the water where the river is calm. And there you see the riverbank. But you can't get there because of the log, because you can't swim to the riverbank and let go of the log. And you don't dare let go of the log. And so that introduces the idea that there's meaning to what's going on with you and your eating, and that it would serve you to find out what the function is of the log for you. And then, of course, to make things more complicated, there's always someone on the riverbank yelling, let go of the log, let go of the log. And the inner critic comes in and says, you're an absolute idiot for not being able to let go of the log. That person loves you more than life itself. That person is the top eating disorder expert in the country. And what's wrong with you? And that's when understanding that our nature is such that we will not let go of anything until we're good and ready. I don't care how much that person loves you. I don't care how big an expert that person is. Our nature is that there's a wise part of ourselves that will not let us let go. So what do you do instead? Well, you let go of the log and you practice floating. And when you start to sink, you grab back on. And then you let go of the log and you try treading water. And when you get tired, you grab back on. And then you swim around the log once and then grab back on, and twice and 10 times, 100 times, 200 times, until you have the strength and confidence to let go of the log. Then you swim to shore. So this idea that there are skills that one needs to develop in order to be free from the struggle with eating. And it's totally possible. Anyone can learn those skills. You do not need special DNA.
Right. And that is, it's so beautiful. It's a beautiful video on YouTube and on your website, which I'll be sharing your website and your book information about the Light of the Moon Cafe. Where else can people go to get in touch with you and to just embrace everything you have? Because I think it's a perfect way to end this idea for people to understand how powerful your skill at metaphor. I mean, you're like the queen of metaphors, and metaphors are essential for cracking us open, So
right.
they need you.
Well, I'm available if someone wants to work with me individually at Anita at lightofthemooncafe.com. However, if they're interested in taking one of the courses / support circles at Light of the Moon Cafe, they can go to lightofthemooncafe.com. And like I said, I'm on the forum all the time communicating with people, and there's 3 live calls So that's another place. And if they want to read more, they can go to my website, dranitajohnston.com.
Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your wisdom.
It is my pleasure, and I really love what you're doing, Rebecca. I am so appreciative of the community that you're creating to support individuals to really be more mindful and compassionate towards themselves rather than super duper critical, because that's where freedom lies. It really is.
Yep. It's so freeing. It's a better place to be. Thank
Yes.
you so much. It's like literally the hair on my arms is raising up when you see somebody who influenced you decades ago and then recognizing your work. So thank you so much.
You are welcome.
And that's our show. Thank you so much for listening. I would love if you could take a minute and leave a rating and review on iTunes. I know they don't make it very easy, so I have a few quick tips for you. First, launch the Apple Podcast app, and then you're going to click the search button to enter the name Body Kindness, and you'll find my podcast. You'll see the album art. And when you click on the album art, there is going to be a button in the middle at the top. It's called Reviews. Click that. And then when you scroll to the bottom, you will see an option to leave a review. And so you'll click that button and go ahead and write your thoughts. I also would love ideas for future episodes. You can email me, Rebecca@bodykindnessbook.com. Again, that's Rebecca@bodykindnessbook.com. I love chatting about the show and how it's helpful. And so keep those emails coming. And also, if you're not yet completed with the e-course, don't forget that's a free resource for anyone who's interested in practicing body kindness. If you visit bodykindnessbook.com and click on Get Started, just enter in your name and email and you'll get instant access. I'll see you there.